So we just got done exploring that what we want is essentially the growth edge for your need. And when your need at one level gets settled, then we start naturally going to look for where we can grow. And of course, from that perspective, that's gonna be superfluous. It's gonna feel really vulnerable. It's gonna feel wasteful. It's gonna feel unnecessary. And it's gonna feel like a host of those things. But then at the same time, when you do that in a way that is that's balanced, that's sustainable, then it starts feeling really good. And when you first start going for a want, you really won't know how to do this in a way that's successful. And that's one of the reasons why when we first approach a want, not only does it feel so vulnerable, but we're really bad at it. We make a lot of mistakes because we're not used to getting it met at the next level, if you will, or in this new territory of want. And the reason I say new territory is because one of the things that is a little bit confusing about these needs is that depending on who we are, what we're good at is different. Like some people may not be so good at getting the individual things met, but are very good at systematizing and bringing order. Some people are really good with purpose. And even though they're not so good with the other rungs, they're really good at purpose. And some people are just good at transcendence, where they just can be. And so it's kind of like it doesn't necessarily follow that order. And so depending on who you are, some people are just really good with relationships, but they are really bad with systematizing anything. Some people are really good at driving, working really hard, pushing themselves to the limit of their talent and their ability, but their relationships suffer, and there's some other things that suffer. So there is some a significant amount of variation. So this hierarchy of needs should not be looked at from a perspective of you need to first do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, and then you need to do this. It's not a sequential thing. It's an ecosystem thing, where it shows what's dependent upon what. And so some people who are, let's say, for instance, really good at relationships that are not so good with their health and their routines, they don't need as much of that oftentimes either, but they still suffer because everyone needs it. It's kind of like the language is funny, isn't it? Like everyone needs it, so you really show it's actually kind of a need. But having said that, you can be good at something and you can still suffer from the other things not being there. And so your sequence, it's not a sequential thing, but if you have one thing, it typically supports the thing that's on top. So even if you have relationships and you're really good in relating, but let's say for instance you're not so good at keeping your schedule because your systems are not so good, your routines are not so good, then you're gonna have to use your relational skills to compensate by saying I'm sorry and making up for it, but it's still gonna strain your relationship, right? So it kind of shows that if the bottom rung is not good, it's gonna make you suffer in the top rung. And if your top rung is good, then you do better. It supports your top rung. Let's say for instance your steam rung where you're suffering, where you're working really hard and you're going full force. If you have good relational skills, typically it's actually easier to do that. If you have good routines, it makes it easier for you to go full tilt. If you've got good health, it makes it easier for you to go full tilt, right? So there is a relationship, but that does not mean that you have to go sequentially. So sometimes when you're really good, your growth edge is different, and so your want typically takes you towards your growth edge. And pain you will feel wherever you're lacking in wherever you're lacking in your needs. So pain is whatever you feel where your needs are not being met, and your needs, the way you get your needs met, is not balanced. So I just kind of wanted to quickly explain that because I feel like this is oftentimes not a very well understood concept. Everyone oversimplifies the Maslow's hierarchy of need, and they try to always sequentially go, and sometimes that may not work. And well, I should rephrase that. If you have a way where someone keeps you accountable and keeps you in sequence, that can work, because then you'll keep working on it until it works. But it may not be the best way to do it for you in the sense of it feeling good. Typically, following your own growth edge feels the best for you, and it's actually the way to do it in a way where you can do it with less accountability, where you direct yourself, unless your personality is such where you like doing things with the people. Like there's a personality test that's called Four Tendencies, and it shows how you can get yourself to do things, like how you can meet your own expectations and meeting other people's expectations, actually. And so I don't want to go into that too much, but if you're interested in this, check that out. It's typically, there are 4 different things where there's something that's called a polar. This is typically what you see as the superheroes, where they can meet their own expectation and other people's expectations that are really disciplined. And then there is the obliger. Those are the people who are really good at meeting other people's expectations, not so good at meeting their own. They can do what someone else asks them to do it, but they don't do such a good job of following their own. And then there's the questionnaire, where they're good at following their own expectations, not so good at following someone else's. And then there's the rebel. They're not so good at following their own expectations and not so good at following someone else's. And it shows what the strengths of each is and where each one suffers. And so 4 tendencies, check that out. I think you'll have that fun. But having said that, what you'll notice is that if you follow your own growth edge of what you want, then it's easier to do things. You can be self-directed and do that without much external input or structure, unless you are an obliger and that's one of your needs. That's how you naturally grow. And so in that case, you do want to partner up with people and get accountability going. But on the whole, you're really following who you are. And so if you do that, then you'll notice that the path can be very diverse. And typically we look for simple answers. It's always like this. Yes, if you just follow step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, then you'll get there, and things like that. And I feel like that's oversimplifying a human being. It doesn't work like that. As a matter of fact, if you understand this principle, then you can follow your want while being responsible for your needs. And that is a principle that is time proven, and actually, if you really understand it, in some ways you could say it's the only way things work, and it's the only way to be self-motivated and to find the inspiration from within, if you will, right? Because following your want is an inspiration. It's an inspiration that comes from within. And so that's why your want is so powerful. And unless we understand that, we will try and continue to get rid of it because it feels so vulnerable. And that's one of the issues with it, right? And so if I go back and just kind of define what I was talking about, so a want's a growth edge. And if you follow that, then you find out that it becomes an infinite source of inspiration. And because it's you following your natural growth edge of your own needs. And it will not be sequential. And the Maslow's hierarchy of need is not a sequential thing. It just shows the interdependence of your needs and how they work together. And that's really an ecosystem. You can actually even reverse the Maslow's hierarchy of need. As a matter of fact, you can say that service and being is the most important thing. And then finding meaning is the most important thing. And then from there, you should really work your hardest. And from there, you should actually find all things that are meaningful in terms of relationships and bonding. And then from there, you should structure your life. And then from there, you will find balance to all your needs. And so you can inverse the Maslow's hierarchy of need. And this is the typical approach that spirituality has done. However, studying this much, I found that inversing it is not always the answer. I found that people who have spiritual talent actually do this. In reality, really, the answer is following the individual's talent and the individual's need and what they're talented in. If you're relationally oriented, then you need to start there. If you're driven oriented, then you need to start there. If you're structure oriented, you need to start there. If you are health oriented, you need to start there. If you are purpose oriented, you need to start there. And if you are service oriented, you need to start there. So really, personalized needs, a personalized path is really the answer.